It's a good reminder that we all have that built-in ability to learn languages. We just need to like tap back into those natural instincts we had as kids.
All right, so get this. Have you ever thought about, like, how you learned your first language, as a baby?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah, like we didn't crack open a textbook or start memorizing verb conjugations.
No, definitely not. More like little sponges just soaking it all up.
Exactly. And somewhere along the way, learning a new language kind of turned into this big scary thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, what if we could just, like, tap back into that natural way of learning, like we did when we were kids?
It's a really interesting idea. Like, there's actually a ton of research on it too, you know? They call it implicit learning. It's like how our brains pick up these patterns and structures without us even like consciously trying.
Okay, so implicit learning. Break that down for us a little.
Okay, well, think about how you learn to walk or talk. No one sat you down with a manual, right?
Right.
You just kind of observed and you imitated and you experimented and your brain just like figured it out in the background, like all this complex mechanics of movement and language.
So you're saying instead of immediately diving into textbooks and grammar drills, we should just, like, immerse ourselves in the language.
Yeah, exactly. Like start by listening to authentic English as much as possible. You know, podcasts or music, movies, anything that like grabs your attention.
Okay.
And don't even worry about understanding every single word at first. Just let the sounds and the rhythms kind of wash over you.
You know what? That reminds me. Just the other day, I was making dinner, and I had this English podcast on in the background. And I wasn't even really paying attention to it, but I swear I started picking up on, like, certain phrases and intonation patterns.
See, that's your brain during that implicit learning thing. And here's another trick to kind of boost that effect, mimicry.
Mimicry. Like, am I supposed to start, like, parroting everything I hear?
Ha ha ha. Not exactly. More like think of an actor rehearsing their lines. Choose a short audio clip in English and try to like imitate the speaker as closely as possible, like their pronunciation, their intonation, even how they pause, all of it.
Huh. Now that you mention it, I used to do that all the time with music. I'd try to sing along to my favorite English songs, even if I totally butcher the words sometimes.
There you go. Perfect example. Which brings us to another key ingredient, repetition. Babies are like masters of repetition, right? They just babble and repeat sounds until they get them right.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like practicing a dance move or playing an instrument. The more you repeat it, the smoother it gets.
Exactly. Now, here's a tip to take your mimicry game to the next level. Record yourself while you're repeating those phrases, and then listen back and compare your recording to the original. You'll be surprised what you notice, like the little things in pronunciation, the rhythm, the intonation.
Wow, I never thought about recording myself that way. That's like having a personal pronunciation coach right in my pocket. It's like this is starting to feel less like studying and more like a fun experiment.
And that's the whole point. Learning a language shouldn't feel like a chore, you know? When you tap into that playfulness, that curiosity, your brain just opens up to new information.
Okay, so we're out here mimicking, repeating, like babies learning to talk. It's fun, but how do we actually, like, start building vocabulary and understanding grammar, without cracking open a textbook?
Well, think about how babies learn new words. It's all about context, right? Like they hear ball while they're playing with a ball or hungry when it's time to eat.
So it's all about connecting words with real-life experiences. But how can we do that if we're not, like, constantly surrounded by English speakers?
Try this. Narrate your day in English. Describe everything you're doing, seeing, even thinking, all in simple English.
Wait, hold on. You're saying I should, like, talk to myself in English? Like I'm brushing my teeth, making coffee, going for a walk?
Exactly. Might feel a little silly at first, but it's a seriously good way to practice thinking in English. And you'll be surprised how many words you already know, you know?
Hmm. That reminds me of when I was first learning to cook. I'd read recipes out loud in English, even if I didn't understand every single word. It kind of helped me get comfortable with the vocabulary and the flow of the language.
See? Perfect example. And as you keep narrating your day, you'll start noticing patterns in sentence structure and grammar, that implicit learning kicking in again.
So instead of memorizing grammar rules, we're like absorbing them naturally through practice. Kind of like learning to swim by jumping in the pool, not reading a manual.
Exactly. And here's another powerful technique that builds on that: dictation.
Dictation, like back in school when the teacher would read a passage and we'd have to write it down.
That's the one. It's a classic technique, but it works wonders for training your ear to hear all the nuances of English pronunciation and spelling.
Okay, I'm game. But how do I do dictation in the 21st century? Do I need to find a teacher with a ruler and a stern look?
Haha, no way. There are tons of online resources with audio clips and transcripts. You can even use your favorite podcasts or audiobooks.
So I listen to a short clip, write down what I hear, and then check it against the transcript.
That's it. And don't be afraid to pause and rewind as many times as you need. The goal is to really train your ear to pick up on those individual sounds and how they all fit together.
This whole approach is really changing how I think about learning English. It's less about cramming and more about training my brain to think and react in the language.
That's a huge shift. When you approach it with curiosity and playfulness, it becomes a journey of discovery, not a chore.
Speaking of discovery, you mentioned something earlier about focusing on high-frequency words. What's that all about?
High-frequency words are the words that pop up most often in spoken and written English. They're like the building blocks of the language.
So instead of trying to learn every word in the dictionary, I should zero in on these high-frequency words.
Exactly. By mastering the most common words and phrases, you'll be able to understand and take part in way more conversations. And then as your vocabulary grows, you can start adding those more specialized words.
Makes sense. It's like building a house. You start with a solid foundation, and then you add the walls, the roof, all the fancy details later.
Perfect analogy. And remember, learning these high-frequency words doesn't have to be boring. You can use flashcards, play games, even create your own little stories using these words.
This is starting to feel a lot less overwhelming and a lot more doable. Like I'm finally cracking the code to fluency.
And it all circles back to those baby-inspired principles we talked about: immersion, repetition, experimentation, and most importantly, having fun.
Okay, we've covered mimicking, narrating our day, dictation, and focusing on high-frequency words. Anything else we can add to our, baby-inspired language learning toolkit?
Well, remember how fascinated babies are by visuals, always watching, absorbing information through their eyes.
So you're saying I should watch more cartoons? Not that I'm complaining.
Cartoons are a great start, but think bigger: movies, TV shows, documentaries, even those how-to videos online. They all give you this rich visual context for language learning.
Yeah, it's like having a built-in dictionary, right? You see the action, you hear the words, and your brain just starts connecting the dots.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of flashcards. Pair new words with pictures or even real objects creates a much stronger link in your memory.
I actually used flashcards when I was learning Spanish. It really helped with vocab, but sometimes it did feel a bit, I don't know, repetitive and dry.
And that's where storytelling comes in. Think about how much babies love stories. They're drawn to the characters, the adventures, the emotional connection.
So instead of just memorizing words on our own, we should try to weave them into stories.
Exactly. It could be anything: short stories you write, anecdotes you share, even just describing your day like you're telling a story.
I actually tried something like that recently. I was struggling to remember the word for traffic jam. So I made up this silly story about a snail causing a traffic jam on the highway. It sounds ridiculous, but it worked. The image just stuck in my mind. Now I can easily remember the word.
That's the power of storytelling. It makes language learning more memorable, more engaging, and it taps into that childlike sense of wonder that's so important for learning any language.
This is amazing. We're using visuals, we're telling stories, we're tapping into our inner child. Anything else we can learn from these little language masters?
Well, one of the biggest lessons is the power of repetition, but not just any kind of repetition. Babies don't just hear a word once and boom, they know it. They hear it over and over again in all sorts of different situations.
So are you saying we should be like parrots, just mindlessly repeating phrases?
Not exactly. It's about strategic repetition. Spaced repetition, to be exact.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this spaced repetition magic.
It's a technique where you review material at longer and longer intervals. So you might learn a new word today, review it tomorrow, then again in a few days, then again a week later.
So instead of cramming everything in one go, we're spacing it out over time.
Exactly. And that gives your brain the time it needs to really solidify the information. It's like building muscle. Got to give it time to rest and recover between workouts.
This is starting to feel like a total language learning revolution. We're ditching the old methods and embracing this more natural, baby-inspired approach.
And it's an approach backed by science. We're basically tapping into our brain's natural wiring for language. We all have that ability, we just got to rediscover it.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot here, like mimicking, narrating our day, dictation, focusing on those high-frequency words, using visuals, even storytelling, right? It's really amazing how much we can learn just from watching how babies learn language.
Right. It's a good reminder that we all have that built-in ability to learn languages. We just need to like tap back into those natural instincts we had as kids.
But here's a question that keeps popping into my head, If babies can learn languages so easily, why does it feel so much harder for us grown-ups? Like what changes as we get older?
Well, one big difference is just our mindset. Like as adults, we tend to overthink things, we get stuck on grammar rules, we're worried about making mistakes, and we put all this pressure on ourselves to learn fast.
Yeah, like we lose that fearlessness we had as kids. Like we were totally cool with just babbling and experimenting with sounds, even if it sounded totally crazy.
Exactly. And we were so patient too. We didn't expect to be fluent overnight. We gave ourselves the time and space to learn at our own pace.
That's so true. And it's like we live in this world of instant gratification now. So it's easy to get discouraged if we don't see results right away.
Yeah, and that can lead to frustration and even giving up sometimes. But remember, language learning is a journey, not a race. It's all about consistency, persistence, just enjoying the process.
So how can we like cultivate that patience? Like how can we shift our mindset to be more like a baby?
Well, one way is to just set realistic goals. Instead of aiming for perfect fluency in a couple of months, just focus on smaller, more achievable things, like maybe learn 5 new words every day, or I don't know, be able to have a basic conversation.
I like that. It's about celebrating those little wins along the way instead of feeling overwhelmed by the big picture.
Exactly. And don't forget, mistakes are part of the process. They're not failures, they're chances to learn and get better.
Hmm. That reminds me of what you were saying before about embracing those mistakes. Just like a baby does. They're not afraid to try new sounds and experiment, even if it doesn't sound right.
That's the key. Give yourself permission to be playful with it. Experiment, don't take yourself too seriously.
It's all about finding that joy in the journey of learning. Just like a little kid exploring the world for the first time.
Absolutely. And when you come at language learning with that childlike curiosity and that enthusiasm, it becomes an adventure instead of a chore.
This has been such an awesome conversation. I feel like I've got a whole new way of thinking about learning English. It's not about memorizing rules and cramming vocab. It's about tapping into those natural abilities we all have and just like rediscovering that joy of learning.
Yeah, and remember, it's never too late to start. No matter how old you are or what your background is, you have the potential to learn a new language. Just embrace those baby-inspired tips we talked about and enjoy the ride.
So to all our listeners out there, ditch those textbooks, find the fun in it, and learn English like a baby.
Yeah, language learning is a gift, not a burden. So embrace the process, celebrate your progress, and never lose sight of that childlike wonder.
That's all for our deep dive into the fascinating world of learning English like a baby. Until next time, happy learning, everyone.